Ladies and gentlemen, let me talk to you tonight about something powerful, something subtle, and something a lot of people don't realize they're doing right. The title is this: what goes through a man's mind when you match his distance. Now listen to me carefully, because this right here is not about games. It's about growth. It's not about manipulation. It's about self-respect. And when a woman finally decides to stop over-explaining, stop over-texting, stop chasing clarity from confusion, something shifts in a man's mind whether he's ready for it or not. The first thing that goes through a man's mind when you match his distance is confusion. Real confusion. See, most men are used to patterns. If he pulls back and you move closer, that's a pattern. If he goes quiet and you get louder, that's a pattern. But when he creates distance and you calmly do the same, his brain goes, "Hold on, this ain't normal." He starts replaying conversations. He starts wondering what changed. Not because you said anything, but because you didn't. Silence backed by self-respect is loud. And for the first time, he's not in control of the emotional temperature anymore. That messes with him. The second thing that hits his mind is curiosity mixed with insecurity. Now don't misunderstand me. Men don't always show insecurity the way women do. A man's insecurity shows up as overthinking, ego bruising, and checking his phone more than he wants to admit. When you stop reaching, he starts wondering who or what has your attention. Not because he owns you, but because he assumed you were always available. Matching his distance removes the safety net he didn't even know he was standing on. And when that net disappears, he feels the drop. Ladies and gentlemen, the first thing that goes through a man's mind when you match his distance is confusion. And I don't mean light confusion, I mean deep sit with yourself at night confusion. Because most men, whether they admit it or not, operate off patterns and expectations. If he slows down, he expects you to speed up. If he pulls back, he expects you to lean in. If he gets quiet, he expects you to fill the silence. That's how it usually works. And as long as it works that way, he never has to question himself. But the moment you match his distance, the moment you stop chasing the energy he stopped giving, his mind hits a wall it wasn't prepared for. See, when you don't call, don't text, don't ask, what's wrong? Don't explain how you feel for the 10th time. His brain starts running laps. He starts thinking, wait a minute, she used to respond faster than this. He starts wondering why the dynamic changed when he didn't announce any change himself. And what really throws him off is this: you didn't make a scene. You didn't argue. You didn't cry. You didn't beg for reassurance. You simply adjusted. That's the part that rattles him, because silence with confidence feels different than silence with anger. Now his mind starts replaying moments. He thinks back to the last conversation. He analyzes his tone. He rereads messages. He wonders if something he said landed the wrong way. And here's the key part. He starts paying attention. Men often don't pay attention when things are guaranteed. When he thought you'd always be there, always respond, always care more, he could afford to be careless. But when you match his distance, you remove the guarantee. And once something is no longer guaranteed, it becomes valuable. That confusion also touches his ego. And let me tell you something about ego. Men don't like to admit when it's shaken, but you can feel it in their behavior. He might start posting more. He might suddenly view your stories faster. He might casually check in with a "hey stranger" like nothing happened. Why? Because his mind is trying to regain balance. He's thinking, I didn't think she'd actually step back. And that thought alone forces him to see you differently. Matching his distance doesn't scream, it whispers. And whispers make people lean in. When you stopped reacting, he started reflecting. He starts wondering if you finally got tired, or worse, if you finally realized your worth. Because a man can handle anger, anger gives him something to push against. But calm adjustment, that scares him a little. Calm tells him you're not acting out of emotion, you're acting out of decision. And decisions carry weight. In his mind, questions begin to stack up. Did I misjudge her? Did I think she needed me more than she actually does? Did I overplay my hand? See, men don't expect consequences when they don't see immediate reactions. He thought distance wouldn't cost him anything. Matching his distance introduces a quiet consequence without punishment. You didn't threaten to leave. You simply showed him you can stand still without him. And the longer you hold that energy, the louder it gets in his head. Because now every move he makes feels measured. If he reaches out, he wonders if you'll respond the same way you used to. If he doesn't reach out, he wonders if you even notice anymore. That uncertainty puts him in the exact emotional space you were standing in before. And now he understands it without you having to explain it. This confusion is important because it breaks entitlement. It interrupts autopilot. It forces a man to stop assuming and start thinking. And thinking leads to awareness. Awareness leads to choice. He either chooses to step up and re-engage with intention, or he chooses to stay distant and reveal that he was never planning to give more in the first place. Either way, the truth surfaces. What's powerful here, ladies and gentlemen, is that you didn't change who you are. You changed what you tolerate. You didn't harden your heart. You protected it. And his confusion is not your responsibility to fix. Confusion is often the first step toward growth. It's the moment when comfort disappears and reality walks in. Matching his distance doesn't mean you stopped caring. It means you stopped overextending. And when a man realizes he no longer has unlimited access to your energy, your time, your emotional labor, his mind finally wakes up. He sees that connection requires effort, not assumption. And that realization, that quiet confusion, is where everything begins to shift. Ladies and gentlemen, the second thing that goes through a man's mind when you match his distance is a powerful mix of curiosity and insecurity. And this combination is far more intense than people realize. Because curiosity makes him think about you, but insecurity makes him question himself. And when those two collide, a man's internal world becomes loud even if his outer world looks calm. He may not say anything. He may not react publicly. But internally, his mind is working overtime. When you stop reaching, when you stop initiating, when you stop filling the space he created, his first thought isn't anger, it's curiosity. What is she doing? Where is her energy going? Why isn't she trying anymore? See, he doesn't automatically assume you're gone. He assumes something changed. And that something becomes a mystery. And human beings are naturally drawn to what they don't understand. Distance creates questions. Silence creates imagination. And imagination is powerful. Then insecurity slips in quietly, not loud, not dramatic, but subtle. He starts wondering if he miscalculated his importance in your life. He starts questioning the role he plays in your world. Men don't usually ask, "Do I matter to her?" out loud, but they feel it. When your attention shifts, his sense of position shifts with it. And that's uncomfortable. Because for a long time, he was confident in where he stood. Your consistency made him feel secure without effort. Now his mind begins to create scenarios. Maybe you're busy. Maybe you're focused on yourself. Maybe someone else is making you laugh. Maybe you finally realized you deserve more. And here's the truth. He doesn't even need proof. Possibility alone is enough to disturb his comfort. Because comfort was built on predictability. And when predictability disappears, stability disappears with it. This is where ego gets involved. A man's ego doesn't like feeling replaceable. It doesn't like feeling optional. It doesn't like feeling uncertain. So his behavior might shift. He might casually check in. He might suddenly show more interest than before. He might test the connection just to see if it's still there. Not because he's suddenly transformed, but because his mind needs reassurance. He needs to know he still has access. And if he doesn't reach out, that doesn't mean he doesn't feel it. Some men internalize instead of acting. Some men sit in their pride and struggle silently. But either way, the curiosity remains. Because your energy was familiar. Your presence was consistent. Your care was reliable. And when something reliable becomes unpredictable, it becomes valuable. Here's the deeper layer. Insecurity doesn't just make him think about you. It makes him think about himself. He starts wondering if he did enough. If he gave enough. If he showed up enough. Because when someone pulls away calmly, without drama, without accusations, without emotional chaos, it forces introspection. You didn't attack his character. You removed your effort. And that's a different kind of mirror. Matching his distance also changes the power dynamic in his mind. Before, he felt emotionally safe because he assumed you were more invested. Now, the investment feels balanced, or worse, unclear. And uncertainty is uncomfortable. It makes him aware that you have autonomy, that you have a life that doesn't revolve around him. that your world doesn't collapse in his absence. And that realization humbles him whether he admits it or not. Curiosity keeps him watching. Insecurity keeps him thinking. He starts noticing things he ignored before. Your independence, your silence, your calm, your emotional control. And these traits don't make you less attractive. They make you more intriguing. Because now you're not chasing him, you're choosing yourself. And here's the part most people miss. This isn't manipulation. This is natural consequence. You didn't create distance. You responded to it. You didn't withdraw love. You withdrew overextension. You didn't change your heart. You changed your boundaries. And boundaries shift perception. In his mind, you are no longer the constant background presence. You become a conscious thought, a question mark, a possibility. And when someone moves from being background noise to being a focused thought, their value changes in the mind of the observer. Some men respond to this by stepping up. They communicate more. They show more effort. They seek clarity. They pursue. Others respond by retreating further, because insecurity mixed with ego can also produce avoidance. But either response reveals truth, not because you demanded it, but because your energy shift exposed it. So curiosity and insecurity don't just make him think about you. They make him confront his role in your life. They make him feel the emotional space he created. They make him aware of the silence he didn't think would matter. And in that awareness, something changes. Because once a man feels the possibility of losing access to your energy, your presence, and your care, your value becomes real to him in a way it never was when it was guaranteed. Ladies and gentlemen, the third thing that goes through a man's mind when you match his distance is respect. And this is not the shallow kind of respect that comes from attraction or charm, but the deep respect that comes from recognizing strength, self-control, and self-worth. Because when you stop chasing, stop explaining, stop trying to fix what you didn't break, a man begins to see you through a different lens, not as someone he can predict or manage emotionally, but as someone who stands on her own ground. At first, he may not even call it respect. He might feel it as surprise. He might feel it as discomfort. He might even feel it as tension. But underneath all of that is the realization that you are not operating from desperation, fear, or insecurity. You are operating from choice. And choice is powerful. When a woman chooses herself without anger, it challenges a man's assumptions about control and emotional leverage. See, many men are unconsciously conditioned to believe that if they pull back, the other person will compensate. That compensation makes them feel needed without requiring effort. But when you match his distance, you interrupt that belief. You show him that your value does not decrease just because he is less available. You show him that your life does not pause waiting for his attention, and that realization forces respect, because people respect what stands firm without needing validation. In his mind, he begins to separate attraction from availability. Before, he may have confused the two. He may have thought your constant presence meant you had less going on, less power, less independence. But now that you've stepped back with grace, he sees that your presence was a gift, not a default. And gifts are appreciated when they are not endlessly given away. This respect also comes from emotional discipline. You didn't lash out. You didn't accuse. You didn't threaten to leave. You didn't demand reassurance. You simply adjusted your energy to match his. And that tells a man something important. You are emotionally stable. Emotional stability is rare. And rare things are respected. In his mind, he starts thinking, she didn't try to control me. She didn't try to trap me in a conversation. She didn't make me the center of her emotional world. And whether he likes it or not, that elevates you. Because it shows you are not looking to be chosen, you are choosing. And a man can feel that shift even if he can't explain it. Respect also shows up when he realizes you didn't collapse without him. You didn't spiral. You didn't chase clarity. You didn't beg for effort. You remained whole. And wholeness is intimidating to someone who was comfortable with imbalance. When a man sees that you are okay without him, it doesn't make you less desirable. It makes your presence more meaningful. This respect changes how he thinks before he acts. He becomes more careful with his words, more aware of his tone, more conscious of his effort. Because now he knows you are not going to tolerate half energy. He knows inconsistency will be met with consistency, not compensation. And that awareness shifts his behavior whether he moves closer or further away. In his mind, a quiet rule is established: I can't treat her casually. And that rule matters, because casual treatment is reserved for things we think we can replace or lose without consequence. When you match his distance, you introduce consequence without punishment. You don't threaten, you demonstrate. And demonstration is stronger than explanation. This respect also forces him to confront his own level of maturity. He starts asking himself if he is capable of meeting you where you are. Because your calm, your restraint, your self-respect expose any lack of effort on his part. And that can either inspire growth or trigger withdrawal. But again, that outcome is not something you control, it's something you reveal. A man may not say it out loud, but in his mind he recognizes that you are not easily swayed, that you are not easily shaken, that your emotions are not weapons to be played with. And once he sees that, he knows that if he wants access to you, it will require intention, consistency, and respect in return. Matching his distance doesn't make you cold. It makes you clear. It shows that you value yourself enough to protect your peace. And when a man recognizes that, he understands that being in your life is a privilege, not a guarantee. That realization reshapes how he views you, how he treats you, and how seriously he takes the connection. Ladies and gentlemen, the fourth thing that goes through a man's mind when you match his distance is self-evaluation. And this is where things get real. This is the stage where excuses stop working, distractions lose their power, and truth starts tapping him on the shoulder. Because when you no longer chase, when you no longer question, when you no longer fill the emotional gaps he created, he is left alone with his own behavior. And most people avoid self-evaluation because it's uncomfortable, but your calm distance forces it. At first, he may resist it. He may tell himself, she's just busy, or she'll come back around, or this isn't a big deal. But time has a way of stripping away denial. When days pass and your energy stays the same, balanced, calm, self-contained, his mind starts asking harder questions. Did I show up the way I should have? Did I give mixed signals? Was I putting in minimum effort and expecting maximum loyalty? These are not questions he wanted to ask before, because as long as you were compensating, he didn't have to. See, when you were always available, always understanding, always patient, he could avoid looking at his own effort. But now the mirror is right in front of him, and mirrors don't argue, they don't explain, they just reflect. Your match distance reflects his choices back to him without words. And that's powerful. In his mind, he starts replaying moments he once dismissed, the times he took hours to respond, the plans he postponed, the conversations he cut short, the effort he promised but didn't deliver. Before, those moments felt small because there were no consequences. Now they feel heavier, because consequences don't always show up as fights, they show up as absence. This self-evaluation also touches his intentions. He begins to ask himself what he really wanted from you. Was he serious? Was he just enjoying the attention? Was he keeping you close without committing fully? And here's the part that matters: your distance forces honesty. He can no longer hide behind your effort. He can no longer let your emotions carry the connection. Now he has to face his own level of investment. Some men realize in this moment that they were careless with something valuable. That realization can be humbling, because losing access to someone who treated you well hurts differently than losing someone who caused chaos. Your calm makes him question why he didn't appreciate it sooner. And regret often begins not with loss, but with awareness. Other men realize something else, that they were never prepared to give more, that they enjoyed the benefits without the responsibility. And your distance exposes that too. It reveals whether his interest was shallow or intentional, because a man who truly values you will feel the absence and reflect deeply. A man who doesn't will eventually detach completely. And both outcomes are clarity. This stage is uncomfortable because self-evaluation challenges identity. He may have seen himself as a good guy, a decent communicator, a fair partner. But now he's forced to ask whether his actions match that image. And when there's a gap between who we think we are and how we behave, it creates internal tension. That tension can lead to growth or avoidance. In his mind, he may compare you to past experiences. He may realize that not everyone responds with maturity. Not everyone chooses peace over drama. Not everyone has the strength to step back without bitterness, and that comparison elevates you in his perception, because growth recognizes growth. Your matched distance also removes emotional noise. There are no long explanations clouding the truth, no arguments distracting from the core issue, no emotional bargaining blurring the lines. Just behavior meeting behavior, and in that quiet, self-evaluation becomes unavoidable. He may start asking himself if he's ready for a woman who won't chase him, if he's ready for someone who won't tolerate inconsistency, if he's ready for a connection that requires accountability, because your behavior communicates standards without stating them. And standards make people evaluate whether they qualify. What's important to understand is this: his self-evaluation is not your responsibility to guide. You don't need to help him process it. You don't need to reassure him. You don't need to soften it. Growth requires discomfort, and your job is not to rescue him from that discomfort. It's to stay true to yourself. Matching his distance does not punish him. It simply removes the emotional cushion that protected him from self-reflection. And when that cushion is gone, he either sits with the truth or walks away from it. Either way, you gain clarity, because a man who self-evaluates honestly may step forward with intention, communication, and consistency. But a man who avoids self-evaluation will continue to create distance until the connection fades, and neither outcome is a failure on your part. One is growth together. The other is freedom. Your calm distance gives him the space to see himself clearly. And seeing oneself clearly is the beginning of change, or the confirmation that change was never coming,